us. I get a lot of emails saying that I was having a conversation with my aunt the other day or my brother, and they brought this up and they brought that up. I thought it'd be kind of cool to have you come on and hit what you think are the biggest claims that Christians make in terms of creation science, and the best ways to, in a casual conversation, if people are having with their family or whatever, to push back on that and feel like they have some kind of knowing what they're talking about. Because, go ahead.
It sounds like you're asking for a summary of the foundational falsehoods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, I mean, the first thing is that they do seem to have a false dichotomy where everything boils down to whether there's a God or not a God. That's the thing that bothers me the most. They have a worldview where creation accounts for life, the universe, and everything. And so they imagine that evolution must be the one and only possible alternative viewpoint, and that it has to be a worldview, that evolution also includes the beginning of the universe and the beginning of life and all of this. So they have to put everything in. Remember, they're fundamentalists. They want a very fundamental understanding. Mm-hmm. So they put it into this false dichotomy so that they can weigh it out equally. There's also a false equivalence thing where, whatever you believe for whatever reason is an equal opinion. It doesn't matter that, one can be proven right and the other can be proven wrong, both at the same time. So that's the first thing, is just the very perspective that they start from. Then they're at the very best, the best that we can say about any of the claims of creationism is that none of them can be proven to be true. That's the best we can say.
Okay. Because
there's a whole lot we can prove to be false. So then we just have to get into specifics about what the claims are.
Well, let me bring this up as an example, because we hear this on this show. It's the one example. It irks me every time I hear it, and I don't know why it keeps getting brought up time and time again. Because, like I said, Steve has, I think, done a really good job and has actually spoke to the woman. But Steve, I'm gonna let you explain it. The dinosaur Tish and the
Mary Schweitzer.
Yes.
Yeah. For brevity's sake, Dr. Mary Schweitzer is a very famous scientist that basically did a study on a T-Rex femur, which was about 65 million years old. And in her study, she actually found what's called collagen, which is a type of protein, a structural protein. And this was very revolutionary because the scientists at the time didn't think that things like that could last that long. And to explain it, she came up with a preservation mechanism dealing with iron from heme. And so there's a couple of papers she wrote on this, and yet there are still creation scientists out there that are using her name to say that it has proved young earth creationism or demonstrated evidence for young earth creationism. Although she is a Christian, she is a theistic evolutionist, and she's very adamant about her God belief, but she takes science and believes in science wholeheartedly. And she's actually told them, stop using my name. Nobody's ever said that I couldn't do any of this. And that, because they said that she was in fear for her job, so she had to change her story, and there was persecution against her. She didn't have any of that. So I think that's the story that you're kind of relating to, because she's a very nice woman and brilliant. And I've read her stuff, and it's amazing. But young earth creationists still twist this to make it sound like, oh, we found red blood cells, which by the way, she didn't, that means that the earth can only be 6,000 years old.
So I had this argument.
The same people do.
I had this argument with Pastor Bob Enyart of Denver Bible Church.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Really? I think I did have seen. Yeah.
We had a written debate that I couldn't believe that he agreed to, and even less than I couldn't believe that he actually jumped into. I mean, he actually did it for a couple.
You've been on his radio though show, right?
I was.
Yeah,
I just was really surprised. I was really surprised that even after he promised his readers on his show that he would do this written debate with me, I was surprised that he actually showed up.
Wow.
Because he brought in like 3 or 4 scientific articles, and he said what they said, in each of these articles that supports his point. Well, we read through them. None of the articles said anything remotely similar to what he said they did. None of them.
That's a creationist known thing that
exactly. And so the thing about him saying that they found blood cells, I had already told him before I even knew what articles he might be citing. I said, you might find, like where you will have everything transferred into silicates and other minerals, but except in the cases of pre-existing things that are heavier than the Miller rules. Like if you already have a metal in there, you're going to still have a metal in there. That's not going to be replaced in the fossilization process. So we get to these red blood cells, and what it turns out it is not red blood cells. I said you might have the constituent components of some of these things, of some of these organic materials after they have decomposed, but you're not going to have the actual thing. And so that's exactly what it found. Yep. Heme is the constituent component. It's made of iron. Hello. So that
they're residues. They're residues.
Exactly. So you can't fossilize blood beyond the point of heme.
But she even said from her own mouth, I did not have enough evidence to say we found red blood cells. So anybody who says we found them was wrong from her own statement. And yet young earth creationism, they'll call her a liar. Right. Instead of going, here's a scientist who, is saying that she didn't find this. They're now making this narrative she's lying. They've suppressed the evidence. That's how delusional they get.
Because it's all about make-believe. It is not about understanding truth. That's the problem that you have, not just with young earth creationism, but also flat earthers and all the geocentrism and all of it. The homeopathy, crystal energy, all of that would. I
had a crazy uncle that was into all that.
It has to do with wanting to believe something that isn't really true and being determined to convince yourself that's true, regardless whether it is. And you don't even want to know the truth if it isn't the thing you want to believe.
Well, I grew out of that like in 10 or 11 I actually did the experiment, like the triangle with the razor blade underneath it, pyramid power. Doesn't work. Yeah. Doesn't work. Well, you know what? You experiment as a kid. You don't know. I tried the telepathy thing. I tried all that kind of stuff. It was all bullshit.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall.
Wouldn't it have been great if they taught people that there's two things that you need for anything that you want to assert. First, you have to have the evidence to back it up first, right? If you want to come up with a hypothesis, you want to say that this is your hypothesis. Everybody says, "Well, I have a theory." No, you don't.
You have a guess.
You have a blind ass guess.
Or they use theory wrong. Or they
so you don't have a hypothesis either until you've got two things. One, you have to have the observation. You're going to explain the observation. Now, when you're making up stuff about religion, you don't even have an observation. Life exists, the universe exists, there must be a creator. No, that's that's not an explanation of any kind. It exists, therefore magic is not an explanation. So you first have to have the observation. Then you have to have the explanation of the observation. And hey, you know what? Magic is not an explanation. I said magic words and it happened. No, that's not it.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to do a hangout here in the next couple of days on what's called the argument from contingency. And one of the things about the argument of contingency is it doesn't explain anything. Even if you think it's a good argument, it doesn't get you anywhere. Positing God does not explain anything for multiple reasons dealing with possible worlds and necessities and stuff like that. But it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't get you anywhere. It needs closer to an explanation. So I don't understand why people posit God for a scientific explanation, for theology, philosophy, whatever. But for science, it doesn't work. That's why science excludes gods and supernatural things from the onset. It says
the other two things you have to have is, one, you have to have a way of showing that there's some truth to it. You have to be able to show the truth to it. It means what parts can you show to be true, right? If you've got no part of it, well, I believe in magic. Good. Can you show that there's magic? Show me that. How do we know that there's magic? And more importantly, how do we know if there's not? You come up with a hypothesis. There's got to be a way to test it, that if it's wrong, we could show that it's wrong. Every hypothesis has to have that. If it's wrong, how do we show it's wrong? And of course, religious believers don't want to play any part of that.
What about the F word? The faith word, because oftentimes you hear with us, I know me and Steve get it a lot. We're told that we have to have just as much faith as a Christian.
Remember what I said about false equivalence, the fallacy of false equivalence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Faith and belief are not equivalent concepts.
They say if you believe something, then that's your faith. If you're convinced of something for any reason, that's your faith. That's also equivocation, because we know that that's not what so I'm writing a speech about this right now, where we talk past each other because we use the same words, but we have different lexicons for what these words mean.
Right.
So, I did this. I did the blog post called "Offerings to the Atheist Dictionary," where I clarify the atheist definitions, and I should have put, I didn't put, but I should have put, the religious definitions because they're different. Just put them in a different color. Same word,
That's a good point.
Well,
completely different definition.
The way I use it, if you're convinced of something, you believe it. That's what convinced means, to believe something. Faith, the way I take it, is when you have no good reason to believe something, when you have no evidence you have nothing to substantiate the justification for your belief. You're just taking on blind faith. I use the term faith blindly. I think there's some kind of justification for using those words almost interchangeably, faith and blind faith. I don't know what the difference is, but belief.
I don't think there is one, being honest.
Yeah, I don't think I can't think of a difference between faith and blind faith. To me, pretty much synonymous. But beliefs, we all have beliefs. When people tell me I have no beliefs, so therefore I don't believe that you exist, Steve, that sounds weird, because then they have no knowledge. Because in order to have knowledge, you have to have beliefs.
Well, I think we agree that knowledge is a subset of belief, but is distinguished in that it is demonstrable and measurably accurate.
Yeah, there's a degree of qualification with knowledge. There's much more things you have to demonstrate to have a knowledge claim. Sure, absolutely. Yeah. But so when Thea says, I know something, like I know the Garden of Eden, I know Noah's Ark, any of that stuff, I don't know how they reach that level of demonstration.
I had somebody, I was at a protest. I was protesting a church 2 weeks ago, and somebody from that congregation came up to me and said, just understand that there is one person who knows there's a God. And I said, no.
That was a good video.
Pretending to know what you don't really know. And that's what you're demonstrating right now.
Yeah, I think they throw around the word knowledge way too much, because
he was uppity. That dude was. Well, you're way too.
And it's true though, Kyle. In order to have knowledge, it has to be true. And I'm sorry, but
no. I'm saying
is demonstrably
the guy that he was
not be true.
No. I'm talking about the guy that he was that came up to him in the video. He was very uppity. Like Aron's level of cool in situations. There was that case, and then the case where I believe you were protesting or not. You're not protesting. You were at the dinosaur museum, I think, and a guy came up to you and was like inches from your face. Remember that?
There wasn't a dinosaur. There was a Texas Homeschool Association.
Oh, the Homeschool Association.
Yeah.
You might be talking.
The way that
I touched my nose to his nose in what would have been an explosive situation.
Well, but the thing is, the guy was like maybe half of, not even like height wise, but shoulder wise. Didn't like it. I mean, what was he going to do if you decided to step off on him? I mean, it was going to be bad news and there was a part of me that kind of wanted that. I kind of.
Well, they get a false bravado because they've got God with their side, just like that lady that ran for office with giving out the flyers saying Jesus, endorsed by Jesus, and she lost. Like, what is that? I love that. Yeah, she had flyers that had a little check mark with her name on it, and underneath it said endorsed by Jesus, and she lost the election.
That's funny. The bad thing, though, is that I see more and more two things. People painting atheism as a religion and somehow thinking that they can lump all atheists, because the only thing that unites atheists is their lack of belief in a God. Everything else is different. Everything else is, they have different views on abortion. I mean, you name it, it's all different. There's not one ideology that unites atheists.
They have different views on viruses. They have different views on viruses.
Yeah, clearly viruses are contentious among atheists.
but two is this move to paint, in addition to that, to paint science. And I don't know why this is catching on too, but there's this word called scientism that keeps getting floundered about. Like, it's I don't even know how to describe it because it's so ridiculous.
It's a combination of false equivalence and projection, and the type of projection that they're doing is one that some people have called the thing where you accuse somebody of the thing that you're guilty of, right? Well, this is where you're accusing someone else of being guilty of the thing you're only guilty of, right? So it is the pot calling the silverware black.
Yeah, there actually is a term out there, scientism. It's very rarely used, but the actual scientism is where you have a scientific method. A scientific method is only supposed to be used for science. And there are instances of people inappropriately trying to use a scientific method for other things. That's when scientism comes in.
Yeah, so somebody wrote...
That's all it is.
70, 80 years ago, somebody wrote something about the central dogma of cellular biology. And then the religious institutions